Now, we know that employers are unwilling to hire individuals who have been recently incarcerated. Sometimes they'll say 7 years, 10 years, and 5 years. And individuals returning home from prison or jail tend to be employed at much lower rates than their non-criminal justice involved counterparts for those obvious reasons. Even felon-friendly companies, so to speak, do have limitations. For example, the WIN project for RTD Fast Track that is participating with Denver Road Home and Employment Subcommittee has a 5-year moratorium, meaning you have to be out of prison or jail and not on paper for a minimum of 5 years in order to apply for some of their jobs. Arrest records can be unreliable. They may not show what happened after the arrest. Were charges filed? Were charges dismissed? Even if prosecuted, people are presumed innocent until proven guilty, except by employers. Now, EEOC now strongly discourages relying on just the record of an arrest, but employers may make an employment decision based on that. And I've seen 14 pages of information about an individual who's never been convicted. An employer's going to look at 2 pages and not doing this. And so this is another reason the EEOC had to come out with what they did. So a conviction as shown after a plea agreement, in most cases it's negotiated, and so you see what they're arrested for versus what the plea is versus what the conviction is. So the conviction may have nothing, doesn't even look like what they were arrested for, but it shows all this. So the person may be arrested for assault. The plea bargain might have just been disorderly conduct, and then it went to trial and was dismissed. And now we look at the guy as, oh, I won't hire a violent criminal. And that's what's happening. So we need to teach employers also how to read these. And the importance of it, even if we're not going to, sit there with the whole thing, give them some information they can read with a summary right at the beginning of what they're going to read and what this means, so that they can look at the detail after it and then make sure that it sums it up again at the very end. So in a sense, you're going to tell them what they're going to read, you let them read it, and you tell them what they read. That way they get it 3 ways. And it's important for us in order to get people hired. Any questions on this? Yes?
What about arrests and conviction records that go way far past the 7 years? I mean, I pulled background checks and it showed stuff from 1995.
People, sometimes what employers will do, say 7 years, and they pay a company to pull the background form, and they'll only go back that far, so that's all that'll be pulled up. Oftentimes companies want to know if you've ever had any felonies. It'll go back to the day you were born.
Yeah.
And they're discriminating all the way back. I mean, I've seen companies advertise no felonies. And that means that they'll do a background check and they look at the person from the day they were born forward, so they'll show up.
But can they say that with this new EEOC, with this House bill?
They cannot, but it has to be complained about and in a sense prosecuted, like Lisa's husband can be notified and his office can look at investigating that and helping the employer understand how he's violating Title VII. Employers do not know that they're violating the law. This isn't well published. I don't see anywhere in the news media they came out, oh, there were new EEOC guidelines put out today on April 25th. Nothing.
Nancy, do you recall, and I may be misremembering this, but there was Colorado legislation that looked at having things drop off your record. And I can't remember if that was vetoed or if it was passed in part. Do you remember?
I remember that it was passed in part. And some things can drop off your record if it was like an arrest 25 years ago that did not result in a conviction. It was arrest, not convictions that they want. They said at a certain age it can be, meaning age of the arrest, it can be dropped off your record, but your convictions still show up. So I wish they would have passed the whole thing, but they didn't. And then it talks about conviction. Conviction is shown after the plea agreement. And this is what an employer should only consider convictions that are related to the job. And employers should have a time limit for considering old convictions. What that means is, how old should the conviction be? You know, like 10 years old, 20 years old? What is the cutoff point? My opinion is, I would like to see Colorado pass a law, and I'm hoping people are working toward this, that says you cannot consider convictions that are more than 5 years old. If they have a squeaky clean record for the last 5 years, the chances of them going back is highly unlikely, or committing another crime. Convictions can be wrong. For example, identity theft is huge, and people will say they're someone they're not when they get arrested. I've worked with helping people get jobs who were convicted under a cousin's name or a sister's name, for example, because they had their identification, and so that shows up on their record. I'll give you an example of a funny story. I have never committed a crime. I've had maybe 3 traffic tickets. There's a person named Nancy J. Ryder, it isn't Joyce, same spelling, that lives in New York. And at the time I found this out and had to fight it, I'd never been to New York. She's a porn star.
Whoa.
And she has 3 felonies. And that kept showing up on my record. And I found out about it when one of my daughters said, "Hey Mom, your name's popping up, but we don't think it's you. Unless you have an occupation we don't know about." And so that relates to this. And somebody pulling that up when I'm applying for a job, whoa. It was a good thing I found out about when I was working. So that happens a lot to people.